did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
Well, coo-coo-ca-choo. Welcome back to House of Asher. This is your host, Steve Asher, and we're on episode 50, which is pretty groovy. I didn't think I'd find enough interesting stuff to talk about through 50 episodes, but here we are. And one of those quirky things, when you deal with the paranormal, sometimes that gets into darker subjects. And, everybody likes, sparkling, or ladies like sparkling vampires, or I guess some guys do. But the sparkling vampires and this and that and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes people take certain elements of the paranormal and fantasy and stuff and whatever into darker realms. And sometimes you kind of go darknet with it, which, touches into areas like, serial killers and thrill kill cults and all that kind of stuff, which, I have an interest in from sort of an academic point, but also it's neat to look at it. Well, if you want to say neat, sort of a dark thing to say it's neat, but to kind of look at it from kind of sociological point of view of going, okay, this thing more than likely was not just born from the earth. It had to be nurtured. Certain things had to be added and mixed into the mix to make certain people become monsters. I don't think people are generally born monsters, and that's one of the things we're gonna talk about tonight. I saved this for the 50th episode because I wanted to have a special guest on that knows a lot about this sort of stuff. I had actually seen this lady on a show called Dark Tourism, and it's kind of a quirky episode. I mean, or a series rather. Sometimes it was a little tongue-in-cheek, a little hipsterish, but the bones of it was pretty interesting, especially the particular episode that my next guest was on. Let me go ahead and introduce Natalie Ballard. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Cool.
I'm glad to be here.
I am glad to have you here. And the thing that is interesting about Natalie, I'm sorry to talk about you like you're not in the room, which I guess technically you're not in the room, but you know what I mean, in the conversation.
Yeah, I know you.
Well, what I was going to say was it's one of these things where growing up in the 80s and 90s and stuff, horror movies and stuff sometimes mixes over into reality, and you have real kind of dark, gruesome murders and things, and serial killers have been around for a while, and the U.S. we really know how to make them. And one of the people that we're going to talk about tonight is Jeffery Dahmer. And so if there's anybody that is not down with that, anyone that's got little bitty kids, I don't plan on dropping a whole lot of language, but it might get a little gnarly. Maybe put on some Paw Patrol, something like that. Get them some Play-Doh, and you guys can go play some hopscotch or something. But it's because it's getting ready to get dark. So let's, as I was saying off air, I would describe you, and this is such a kind of a cringy thing because I just know you just from conversations, as a Dahmer enthusiast, definitely someone who has a curiosity about the macabre, and to a point of love of the macabre, and embracing certain darker elements of life. There's, I think there's something truthful in that, and something kind of beautiful. Cue the song, "You're beautiful," but it's one of those things where, you don't really put on airs about it. You're just like, look, this is me. And
yeah, sure, that's fair.
I dig that.
Thank you. And yeah, that's a fair characterization. There's not a lot of easy ways to say it, is there? You don't want to use the word fan. Oh, I'm a fan of Jeffrey Dahmer. I just loved his work.
Yeah, you start kind of getting that Play Misty for me vibe, because people take it wrong. Because the first thing, because like I said, if people come to my like little studio, as I call the inner sanctum, you're going to see posters from all kinds of horror movies. You're going to see, like, and fake, of course, fake skulls, fake, severed hands with like pentacles in it, like a werewolf hand or like a Ramirez type thing. Does that mean I'm saying that's great? Let's go do that? No, but it's definitely become part of the lexicon, of our history. If you throw something out like, it puts lotion in the basket, that kind of thing, people are going to know. There's a reason that stuff like that particular movie that quote is from was so big. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, it won several Oscars. Come on, are we going to pretend that people didn't love Silence of the Lambs? If you walk into my house, you're going to see real skulls.
I don't have one yet. I don't have one.
You don't have one yet?
No, like I said, I've got a polymer cast. It's not like a full size. It's like, what is it, a 2/3 or a 1.3? I suck at ratios. My math is really horrible. But it's like of either a Peruvian skull or an Indian skull, which you knew that like pretty much all skulls, I mean, unless you get one, you actually go collect one, comes from India, right? Like medical skulls?
A lot of them come from India. A lot of them come from China. One of mine comes from China. One of mine comes from South America. I don't remember which one started to ban it. I think China did. Once they realized Americans were kind of trading them and collecting them.
Well, it's a little creepy. I mean, it's creepy, but it's how different is it in a cultural sense than gladiator pits where they threw Christians and things? It was part of the social makeup, and it wasn't. I mean, I don't think collecting a post-mortem thing through a legitimate means, obviously, is necessarily something you're going to see on Home Shopping Network. But
of course not. But the thing is, I'm in a lot of collector groups for this sort of thing, and people really are concerned about the provenance of them, especially with animals. People watch a movie and they cry when the dog dies, but don't care when people die. It's sort of the same thing. So people really do care. Okay, you didn't kill someone or rob someone's grave to get this, right? So people who sell these and trade these do concern themselves with where it came from. And a lot of the human specimens you'll see came from medical schools, or someone knows a doctor who retired and had this in his practice and just sold it off, or, a medical professional died and this was part of his estate sale. So as many as come from other countries, I mean, just as many don't. So I have a human femur that I got from a shop in Portland, a really well-known store called Paxton Gate. They had stuff that I didn't even think was legal to sell. Like, they've got a hippo head on the wall. So it's not as it's pretty above ground. It's not as shady as you would think. And the people in the industry are really great people. And they're not about ripping you off or being gross about it.
Well,
so
it's like when you have a rare book collection, and word will get around if you're fleecing people and you're selling them a fake bill of goods and you're doing real nefarious stuff. You won't stay open. I mean, and it's one of those.
You're exactly right.
It's a niche thing where, like you said, you're not going to go to Walmart and get this. So that you have to, like you said, you have to play fair and have to make proper deals, and otherwise you're not going to stay open long.
Yeah, you're right. One of the groups I'm in is specifically for that. Like, don't deal with these people; they're scammers. This guy's great. Use him. So,
right.
Yeah, you have to police your own kind of in communities like that.
Well, I was man, I don't know how much you watch my Facebook page, which I guess I probably should say, plug myself since I'm shameless. Steve Asher on YouTube, also StevieAsher.com. You can go and find out about my books and whatnot. And House of Asher on YouTube through Conflict Radio. Okay, I'm done. But I had went on there, and I'm sort of like a weird mix of Uncle Fester, Ed Wood, and Christopher Walken. I'll just go like, hey, if you have a heart, let me know. I got a jar. I'm like, I want to make one of those. Like, now I don't mean a human heart. Now I mean like a pork heart that's looks almost identical to a human heart. And,
they look identical, yeah. So do cow's hearts, only larger, yeah.
Right, And so I'm like throwing it out there. And man, you could hear crickets and probably concern. And I'm like, no. I'm trying to make almost like an oddity thing, for like Halloween, because I was wanting to have one for this season, because I've got the smoke machine and lights behind it, like shoots lasers through it. It looks really creepy, and got it to where it's remote control. So like kids come up, it goes, the smoke, don't worry about the man behind the curtain, kind of an Oz thing. Looks really cool. And I thought,
I bet it does.
You know what I'm saying? Why not have like some lights in behind the little heart moving around, and where it kind of refracts and almost looks like the heart. I was wanting to try to make it look like the heart was beating almost, if it's possible. Ooh. Right?
Oh, I bet. Yeah. That'd be awesome. See, yeah, you can get cow's hearts on Amazon, like as sort of, medical specimens to teach with, like for anatomy teachers. Okay. So, and they're not that expensive. Take a look there. However, if any of your listeners do have a human heart that they're willing to part with, I really have been looking for one. so get in touch if you have one to sell. I have a cat heart, but I want a human one.
I jokingly say, and also legally, all opinions expressed on. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to get that's her.
Yeah, Steve has nothing to do with this. This is all me. He didn't know I was going to say that. I just took the opportunity.
No, that's okay. I'm picking, but no. Well, the thing is, and I say it kind of jokingly, but I like to shop local. Like if there's like a local cat, pig farm or something like that, and I ask them, I've asked some folks and say, hey, just kind of touch base with them, and I've just not heard anything. So they're thinking, what's this dude want with a pig heart, man? And I'm just like, I'm gonna put it in a jar, make it look pretty,
Yeah, dude, I'm just gonna put it in a jar. What do you want? Do you want my money?
Right, come on, man. You watch Duck Dynasty, and I don't say a word. Come on, man. We all have our quirks. So, but anyway.
This is what I tell people when they ask me, why are you into the things you're into? I mean, people watch videos of other people playing video games, which I think is such a waste of time.
I don't understand.
But I don't. I don't know why people do a lot of the things they do for fun, but do it. Have fun. I'm going to have fun over here with my true crime and my cat hearts and my skulls. Well, live and let live, people.
Yes. Well, what's so funny is I'm the seventh child of like a Depression era like parents. They were born in the Depression, and pretty much self-educated, hardworking, worked forever, and but my mom, little tiny little lady, but when she wasn't working or doing whatever, if she wasn't out in her garden, which is where I kind of got a love for working on like mint and things like that, which whatever, she would be sitting there curled, on her little chair, smoking her cigarettes, drinking her coffee, reading True Detective magazines or Inquirer, or like, well, they used to call me Stevie when I was small, and say, Stevie, it's it's time for In Search Of, or hey Stevie, it's time for Unsolved Mysteries and stuff, which that theme song was creepy, and but I loved it, and it drew me in, and it's either gonna hit or it won't. It's just like, hey man, let's go out here and pitch the ball around. Yeah, okay. It's like, hey man, check this out. We found like a dead raccoon down the hill. We'll check it out. It's almost bones now. Yeah, let's rock. You're either about the creep life or you're not. And growing up, how it was. I mean, it was a thing. I spent so much time trying to explain it. I finally got to the point of just going, it is what it is. Telling me I'm weird doesn't change it. And if it's obviously something that's dangerous or self-hurt or some sort of weird to the thing of like that, like it seriously could hurt me. I don't think me reading about whatever Jonestown or something like that, or reading about this and that is definitely the worst thing I could be involved in. But
no, it's not.
Did you?
At the same time, you are right. A lot of people, they'll kind of look at you askance and, oh, that weird girl who's into weird stuff. But at the same time, they want to talk to you about it. They want to know what you know. They want to tell you their weird stories. Yes. They want to tell you about the time that they had a run-in with someone who later killed somebody. So they're more drawn to it than they'll admit. I'm just more honest about it.
It's safe to step over here and watch you. Because when I started writing books about the paranormal and ghostly encounters and stuff, especially at the penitentiary where, like I said, I did 10 years. First it was ha 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 and Ghostbusters themes and woo, and then someone kind of go, well, hey, I couldn't say anything around the guys, that kind of stuff. But hey, yeah, I did see this, man, and whatever. And then after a while,
Yeah.
once they saw that I didn't give us whatever, and that I wasn't completely a kook, and it's like, okay, well, this guy takes care of his family. He's not beating up on his wife, and he, all the special
he's not
needs,
killing
and
people.
he's not that they know of. No, but I mean, it's a thing of, it's like, well, this guy is just like you, and that's the thing. There was a movie called 8mm. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I did. I saw that in theaters. God, it's been a long time.
Jacked up film, but it was so interesting when they got the guy and unmasked him.
Right,
like,
they pull his mask off, and he's like, "What, were you expecting a monster?" Yeah, it was James Gandolfini, wasn't it?
Yeah, he says, "Just can't wrap your head around it, can you?" So I'm just like you.
Yeah,
and that's the scariest thing, is that not that people was like, "Oh, they're among us." It's in you. You have.
And I remember that because I went with my best friend from high school, and he started laughing and said, "Ha, bitch lives with his mom." So, and
Exactly.
yeah, that was the kind of the unveiling, right?
Right.
Of this dude you were terrified of the whole film.
Well, humanity has been doing this dance with death. What was the old Typo Negative song? She was in love with death. That's true, and there's something about it. Everyone that I knew were, I grew up a lot with like speed metal guys and punk people and stuff like that, and like my group was, people would side of their head shaved and piercings and all that, and kind of what they would consider damaged girls and damaged boys, but they were tight with each other, and like the Jacksons didn't get it, So like when my wife had met me, it was like the what was it called? The Waltons met the Mansons, and which is really true. So we
That's kind of adorable.
Well, that's right. It's like it's the cutest little serial killers. It's like the seed of Chucky. So that's kind of I guess that's where I'm at. But that's okay, But because
and
well, the thing is,
and
well, go ahead.
What you just said, you kind of reminded me of. I'm sorry, you said something, and now I can't retrieve it. But it reminded me of John Cates' "Ode to a Nightingale." The line "half in love with easeful death." Oh, the Typo Negative song. That's what triggered it. John Cates' "Ode to a Nightingale." Half in love with easeful death. That's it's nothing new, In the Victorian times, there were penny dreadfuls, little newspapers full of bloody crime accounts. I mean, this is something people have always been drawn to and interested in, because normal people, for lack of a better term, normal people, don't see these things, don't know this side of life. Of course they want to know more about it. That's why we have horror films.
I think the truth is there aren't any normal people. We all have a stain. We all have a certain man, and I sound like I'm trying to sound so deep and cool, and I'm not. I'm just saying, it's like, Steve, man, he's so edgy. I'm just saying, I think we all carry it. We all carry that mark, and it's just one of those things. Like you said, there's a reason that horror never went away, and there's a reason that, and especially in times where it's a little bit more oppressive socially and things like that, that's going to come out. I don't know if you're familiar with Fred Olen Ray. He directed stuff like Texas Chainsaw Hookers and just like a whole lot of early on kind of, I don't want to say schlock in the best term, type of stuff. Had like
that sounds vaguely familiar.
Like Michelle Bauer and Anna Quigley and folks like that. And
I definitely know Leanna Quigley, yeah.
Right, and so I mean, like Return of the Living Dead, stuff like that, and that there's something to be said for that. You can have an interest in it because we all do. I mean, that's what I try to explain to people. For some weird reason, I ended up, and I'm not making out this is cool because I've had people there. I've had children next door, but I live next to a mortuary. And
nice.
Well, sometimes I see the hardest things. I see, kids have to bury their family, or people burying their children. You see people pushing gurneys in and out.
Oh, it's an active mortuary.
Very active, and like I said, both my parents, both my wife's parents, all my grandparents, and two of my kids have been through there. But what's the old saying? And I'm not trying to get biblical at all. It's just I think it was a Vampire Lestat thing where it says, God kills discriminately, and so shall we. I used to go which I'm still not happy with it, but it is life. We're built to die. It's the nature of it. And it sounds, my friends go, man, you are German. You are so freaking stark. And I'm not trying to be. It's just, it's you best squeeze everything out of life because we have no guarantee that there's going to be tomorrow. And so I think that's why people who take that step, and I was going to say, it's so interesting. Something that I always can explain to people, because people, oh, well, man, I don't follow that kind of stuff. I don't go out. I'm putting a southern accent, but a good country kind of accent. But I was like, well, man, that's just weird. I said, okay, let me ask you something. When you was a kid, did you ever play with magnifying glasses with anthills? Or better yet, almost getting caught doing something, maybe taking some bubble gum from a local market. How about this? You're riding down the street, you're getting close to a curve, maybe you kind of got your hands off the wheel. You maybe, you're like, man, if I could flip this bike, I could run into this car load of, people. I could hit some kids on the sidewalk, when you're a kid. And it's a little bit of an excitement there. But you can pull it back into check. These people couldn't pull it in check for whatever reason.
The French have a word for that. L'appel du vide. It means call of the void. Like when you're standing on a cliff and for a half second you think, what if I jumped? What if I jumped right now?
Right.
But most people don't jump. Yeah, they stop themselves.
Yeah, there was my kids laugh at me because I quote a lot of really dank memes and stuff, and I had like
old man quoting dank memes.
Yeah, I'm sort of messed up, and I'd have like a Valentine's Day card, and I was like, he said, who's that for? I said, it's for the void, because I'm like in love with death, and they're like, God, what's wrong with you, Dad? But they have it too, to a point, I mean, they're a little bit more able to navigate it, whereas mine's a little bit more on the surface. I can't play straight. It's just it ain't in me, and that's okay. I'm
honestly, I think it's healthy. I think we spoke about this before, that especially in the West, we don't confront or face death like other parts of the world, or even like the West used to. We just pretend it's not there. We pretend we can stave it off. We pretend eventually we'll all be immortal, or they'll have found a cure for death by the time it's time for us to go. And people who are more attracted to the dark, we're probably just as afraid of death. God knows I am, but it's a way to sort of manage that fear. There's a whole branch of psychology about it called terror management theory, and that's what that's about, like managing your fear of death.
Well, I think too that, at least, and I'm sort of talking like I'm sitting here on a couch talking to my doctor, but for me, I think it's more of like, how do I word this? I have kids now. I just have a grandbaby now, and I want to see them grow up and get into good relationships and some sort of self-sustaining employment and be happy. I don't want to leave them not prepared, and I think that's probably true of a lot of parents and mentors and things like that. I don't know. I mean, I like a good sleep. You always heard that term, sleep like the dead. I don't know. I'm not saying it like I'm looking like don't start making phone calls. I'm not making any plans. I'm just saying I think that I think something happened in our culture where once we became, for lack of a better word, a first world nation, it was like, oh well, we're so far advanced now. Confines of death is ridiculous. I mean, the Victorians. I mean,
we don't have to.
Mary Shelley. I mean,
we don't have to look at it.
Right. How many times have you heard somebody?
Most people have never seen a dead body, and I'm not even sure that a body in a casket counts, because it's just been.
Well, that's different.
It's been made up and clothed and has cosmetics on it, and it's just not quite the same.
Is it? No, it really isn't the same.
Yeah, no.
Because I've been at funerals, and not to get into this, but I've been to funerals where people weren't embalmed and things, and the look is different. If you touch their shoulder, their arm, pat, give them kind of a pat, goodbye. The rigor mortis is different. The complexion isn't as waxy. And they do all they can, and I know that's for the family. And
it is, because that's really only who. And funerals are for the living anyway, and they really have always not. I'm not going to say always have been, because there's religious rituals surrounding it involving your transition to whatever afterlife. But now, yeah, they're really for the living.
Well, let me ask you this. Well, go ahead. I was just going to say, before we get into really deep into Dahmer, when you die, are you wanting to be buried, or you want to be cremated, or you want to be planted in an urn and a tree put around you? What?
We have a lot of different options now, right? So you don't have to. And in fact, there's not any law that says you have to go through a funeral home. If you died right now, your family could plant you in the backyard if they wanted to, and nobody could stop them. I don't want to go through a funeral home. It's honestly kind of a ripoff. The average funeral costs $8,000.
That's on the cheap.
And that's a cheap funeral, yes. And a lot of it takes advantage of your family's state of mourning and grief-stricken state while they're not thinking clearly. As of right now, cremation's fine with me.
I thought about that. As long as I'm for sure gone, because I've had like those Poe nightmares of waking up in the coffin. I don't like being constricted in something that would be nightmarish. I had seen a thing, and this is like, people are listening and they're going, man, this is a jacked up episode. What's Steve drinking tonight? But there was a thing I saw where they could compress you, because we're all carbon, basically break you down and compress
into
you.
a diamond.
Into a diamond, yeah. Right? And I was like, wouldn't that be nice? You could. It's like, hey.
I looked into that for my cats, and it's really expensive.
Well, I was like, think about it, guys. It could be an heirloom. And it's like, you graduated, getting married. Here's Grandpa. Put you on the earrings. I said, don't make me into like, certain adult piercings, but something like that. But it would be like, oh my God, what? I think I dropped Dad in the couch. That kind of thing, or the vacuum me up, or the cat eats me. Then you're having to wait for him to poop me out.
Until one of your descendants hits hard times and pawns you at the local, pawn shop.
Pawn and Pappy. See,
here's a diamond.
Sounds like a country song. Pawn and Pappy.
I'll tell you what, though. You just mentioned, make sure I'm really dead because of, my Poe nightmares. I read a book this year that I'm not going to go into it much because it's way too much, but I will tell your audience about it because I've been recommending it to everybody. It's called The Undead, Organ Harvesting, The Ice Water Test, Beating Heart Cadavers, How Medicine is Blurring the Line Between Life and Death. It's by a guy named Dick Teresi. This book blew my mind. It's essentially how in the 50s, a group of 13 Harvard doctors changed the definition of death as we know it. They went from, they basically invented brain death. Brain death is not really what the layperson thinks of it as. You could be brain dead and still have a living body. And it was crazy. I read it just with panic in my chest the whole time.
And you said, what was the man's name again?
His name is Dick Teresi, Teresi. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It will terrify you. I immediately loaned it to my parents and said, change your wills now. They refused to read it after a few pages. So definitely read this book. You especially, you've got a large family. Please read. Yeah, it was, honestly, I've read a lot of terrifying books and I read a lot of really, disgusting, scary crime books, but this book terrified me.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to check that out.
Is definitely one to put on your list.
May try to get this
definitely
on
one
the show.
To put on your list. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Since we were going to talk about doing some photos and whatnot, because I knew you were a little apprehensive about, the whole video thing. I thought I had a decent collection of oddball stuff, old werewolf memorabilia and things like that, and whatever. So you talk about you have skulls, like 1, 2, 4.
I have 2. One of them was on Dark Tourist with me.
Right.
That one is Juan Diego. He's a South American male. Then later I got a smaller one, a Chinese female. You can definitely tell the difference in size. She's half the size of Juan Diego.
Well, there's I mean, I do not want to make this into a show about eugenics. But what I mean is, there are skull differences. There are, body mass and skeletal differences in the different types of regional races. Obviously we're all
I mean, I know that
race,
makes people uncomfortable, but there are differences in sex and differences in ethnicity, and you can tell the difference in a male and female skull by certain physiological markers anyway. There's where your spinal column goes into your skull, there's a big hole there. It's bigger in males than in females. I'm by no means any kind of forensic expert, but there's little markers like that where you can go, oh, yeah, this is clearly a male skull, or this is a female skull. And those are just the obvious ones. You've got to, be a little more knowledgeable to tell age and how old the skull is and things like that, which I don't have those
things like that, and mandible joint breakdown from how long they've eaten this and that, or their diet. You can tell a whole lot of stuff just from that. Well, let me ask you this. Let's talk Dahmer, and of
my favorite subject.
Your favorite subject, your number one guy. In regards of things that you study, because like I said, I think I always was kind of interested about Charlie, because, well, he's a Kentucky guy, and he was just so bat crap crazy on a lot of stuff. But then again, some people says, he didn't do anything. He didn't physically kill anybody. But some people say, well, no, he ordered it. And some people says, well, no, they did it on their own vocation. Now, but like with Dahmer, I mean, it was pretty cut and dry. I mean, he was driven by some need, because I always understood it was, some people go, well, no, he was just evil. No, I think he had a deep-seated need for some sort of interaction. And I'm not saying, oh, poor Jeffy, but I'm just saying there was a thing where, there was something going on. This was not just he just woke up one day and says, let's just start drilling holes in people's head and putting Drano in there. Let's see what goes on.
No, very rarely does anyone wake up one day and say, you know what, this would be a great day to start killing some guys. It always starts with something small and then escalates. And in Dahmer's case, and there are, and you saw this on Dark Tourist too, a lot of women who said, oh, I just felt so sorry for him. I just wanted to cuddle him. And that was irritating.
They get a lot of mail. I've knew a lot of guys when I was at the penitentiary, of guys that, did really horrible stuff to women, horrible stuff to children, eating certain organs and stuff after abusing them and killing them and stuff. And, these girls are like, hubba, that's my kind of guy,
Sure.
And I'm like,
it's not uncommon. It's called hybristophilia. Women who are attracted to not necessarily just serial killers, but high-profile criminals, or just jailed men in particular. And these women generally have a history of poor relationships or abuse. And in a way, I can kind of see where they're coming from. You know where that guy is all the time. He's not going out to the bar with his buddies. Exactly. He's not chasing after other women. His life is focused on your visits, your phone calls, your letters, all the time. So it's a sickness on both their parts, really. I used to think the same thing, like, what is wrong with these women? And yeah, there's something wrong, but it's a pathology of sorts.
Think about.
But on Dark Tourist,
go ahead. Huh? No, I was just going to say, think about, like, and again, I'm just jumping back to Charlie just because that was sort of like my menu, my menu, or I'm hip to it. But like, he had like women that really wanted, that seemed like they really dug him, but then turned around and wanted to keep, get his bones to sell. So there was sort of a capitalist sort of darker element there too.
Oh, sure. What was that 20-year-old girl? I mean, we all kind of figured there's something going on here.
Yeah, it's like the fugly guy who suddenly wins the lotto and suddenly has like a model girlfriend. It's quirky. When they start dating, So
she was cute too. So, and Charlie, what was he? He was in his late 60s when he died, and this wasn't but a few years ago that she was trying to marry him. So we just kind of like sat around and waited for the other shoe to drop, which it did quickly.
If you listen to any of these guys, even even Manson, I'm sure even some of the stuff that Dahmer said, you can take, because they're like, just crazy and didn't make a lick of sense. You can listen to their train of thought on certain subjects and go, that makes complete sense. I kind of agree with the guy. Sorry to get back on the Manson, but talking about, he was very much about, we got to stop destroying the planet. We got to do this and that. We got to find, better outreaches for this and that. Like he'd always said, the reason I had these kids is because you pushed them out. You didn't want these kids. They were damaged and used up like misfit toys. They come to me and I fixed them up. I gave them motivation. That's why they would do anything for me. I don't think he did that so much necessarily out of love of his heart, but if the hoes weren't there, he couldn't have wormed his way in.
I'll be honest and say I haven't read too deeply into Manson because I personally never found him that interesting, and that could be because I didn't grow up in that time period where it was so super shocking. There was, I guess, that innocent vibe, and then here comes this scary cult leader with his gang of kids, who perpetrated these horrible murders. But I have read a lot of his in prison interviews, and I just found myself scanning them going, oh my God, dude, like, make sense or shut up, because a lot of his prison interviews are very rambling, very incoherent. So I don't even know that there was any of that. It was just rambling, and I'm flipping ahead like pages and pages and pages of this stuff, and I'm like, I can't do this. So there's plenty of guys like that I'm not that particularly interested in. It's not, and that's not to say I'm not going to watch Quentin Tarantino's movie, because I sure as hell am. But Manson himself just was never that much of a draw for me. There is a great room in the Museum of Death in Los Angeles that's devoted strictly to Charlie Manson, and that was still very cool to see. It's got like a mannequin wearing some of his clothes, all kinds of artifacts from that time. That was still cool. I was still into that.
Well,
but as for just reading and stuff,
we had went down to Gatlinburg, and they'd had like the Ripley Museum, and had like a bunch of his memorabilia, and like one of his suits and some of his pictures, and his thumb, or what you call it, his thumbprints and all that stuff, where they brought him in. But there's something about Dahmer that draws you in, and I think a lot of times, like when I was a kid, to me it's almost like a kind of a bizarro world hero worship. When I was a kid, most of the cartoon characters, because I loved comic books, were strong, like guys like Colossus. They were impervious. You couldn't hurt them. You couldn't take things from them. You couldn't abuse them, and they were beyond your touch. You couldn't hurt them emotionally. You couldn't hurt them whatever, because I was a real scared kid. Again, doctor on my couch talking to you. But what drew you, or do you even know? Can you really nail it down? What really made you?
I absolutely can tell you. Yeah, I can tell you. Dahmer's basically unclassifiable in the history of serial killers. Most of them will fall under certain categories: organized, disorganized, sexual sadist, things like that. However, Dahmer's pathology was so out there, so different, so bizarre, that he was examined by a dozen psychiatrists, and they all said, we don't know what this guy is. We've never seen anyone like this guy. They ended up diagnosing him as a paraphiliac, which is basically an umbrella term for sexual deviancy. It involves anything from a foot fetish to, cannibalism, sexual cannibalism, which is what he did. So there's nobody like him. He stands alone in serial killer history. Something else that sets him apart is that once he was caught and arrested, he was just like, okay, you got me. I'm going to tell you every single detail of every single thing I did. Serial killers don't confess. If they do, it's for their own purposes, or they embellish, or they lie, or they underreport to kind of screw with the police.
Do you think he wanted to be caught?
And perhaps in a way, because he really got himself in deep. He's hiding bodies in his apartment. The neighbors are complaining about the smell. he's getting sloppier and sloppier because he was an alcoholic, and he's almost been caught by the police several times. It's getting harder to hide his proclivities from people. I won't make that assumption that he wanted to get caught, but one of the things I did, I edited Patrick Kennedy's memoirs. Patrick Kennedy was the detective who arrested Dahmer and brought him in and took his confession. So I got to, see a lot of what Detective Kennedy thought about him, his rapport with Dahmer. And Kennedy thought, okay, this guy's really relieved. He's really glad that it's over and he can finally talk to somebody about this. So at least he thought, Detective Kennedy thought, that Dahmer was relieved to be caught. But the confession he produced over a period of 6 weeks is like nothing that's ever come from a serial killer. Ted Bundy confessed, sort of, but he tried to blame hardcore pornography for what he did. Dahmer basically took total responsibility for what he did, which, again, just doesn't happen with serial killers. They try to mitigate what they've done. Oh, I did this because I have multiple personalities in the Hillside Stranglers case, or I didn't do it at all. I steadfastly refused to admit that I did it, like Gacy. Gacy never confessed. There's a lot of...
I was going to say there was a song by Jane's Addiction called Ted Just Admit It. It's one of my favorite songs.
Ted Just Admit It.
I freaking love that song. And
it's a good song.
It's an effed up song because I'll be sitting there cruising down the road, singing this music. Sex is violent, and people. I'm sure my girls are like, "What are you listening to, Dad?" And I said, "Well, it's a cautionary tale, sweetie. You should really, be careful who you kick it with." And what's so funny, like Ted was like, he had elements of him that reminded me a bit of Will Ferrell. They kind of had that kind of frat boy swagger, where...
Yes, no one on the corner had swagger like Bundy.
Well, and the thing is, Dahmer was so in his own thing. Like, I don't know. I think Ted was maybe self-aware enough to kind of know he had to kind of dance a certain way. And I think Jeff was just like, this is just what I do. It's so strange. It's like, again, I talk in movie metaphors. Like, what was it, The Strangers? It's like, why us? You were home.
Because you were home. Yeah, Jeffrey was very much a loner. He grew up very awkward. He didn't have a lot of friends. If you saw My Friend Dahmer, you saw how his childhood was. He was gay in a time where it still was not that great to be gay. He operated in the 80s and early 90s when AIDS was rampant, and the gay lifestyle was confined still to like really awful parts of town, and
it wasn't an epidemic yet. It was just like drugs weren't until it hit white suburban homes and stuff, and like, oh, we really need to do something about this.
Yeah, then it was a problem, right? Yeah. So and his family was religious. He grew up religious, sort of fell away, and then rededicated himself. So he had a lot of guilt and shame over being gay. Still, so he was very furtive about it. Went out to the clubs, took someone home. He didn't even kill everyone he took home. He killed the ones he liked the most. Strangely, the ones he wanted to keep with him forever, and killing and cannibalizing them was his way of keeping a part of them with him forever.
Okay, and you were saying?
Jeffrey Dahmer didn't kill everyone he brought home with him from the gay bars of Milwaukee. He only killed the ones he liked the most and that he wanted to keep with him. He didn't know how to form normal relationships. If he knew how to do that, perhaps he would never have killed anyone at all. But killing and cannibalizing young men was his way of keeping them with him forever, or keeping a part of them with him forever. which is a logic that probably, in fact, definitely doesn't make sense to us, but that's just how he operated. So 17 young men and boys, dead at his hands because he just didn't know how to attach himself normally in a relationship. Probably a lot out of that guilt and shame over being gay. So please love yourself.
Yeah, and the thing too is, I mean, you could throw a lot of different, I don't want to say scenario and blame on different people. Who says, well, maybe if culturally it would have been okay for him to have been gay, maybe he would have went down this path. I mean, but then I know a lot of guys who, or ladies, whatever, they don't eat people, and I'm not making it a joke. What I mean is they don't consume other people. But for whatever reason, that was his out, and that was his particular fetish, or I guess. I don't know if the eating of the person come from I would assume from a point of control of the person. I mean, I know there's a lot of cultures that will consume enemies and things like that to get their spirit and all that, but I don't think it was anything on that level.
No, I just recently read a book about cannibalism, and it listed, I think, 5 or 7 historic reasons for cannibalism, and that was one, like gain someone's power, 2, respect, one of your own tribe dies, you eat them out of respect, 3, survival, like the plane crash in the Andes or the Donner Party, 4, psychopathy. I don't remember any of the rest. It was really cool though. And I'm not trying to say that that was his only reason for killing and eating people. In fact, there were several other factors that he mentioned, or his father mentioned. Lionel Dahmer, his dad, wrote a really great book called A Father's Story that was pretty sad because his dad, Lionel Dahmer, basically spends this book going, wow, what did I do? Did I screw up somehow? Do I have something dark in myself that manifested in my son? So, but he mentioned that when Dahmer was 4, he had this really traumatic hernia surgery and was never the same after that. He went from a very happy, normal little boy to this brooding, dark, isolated character that he was for just the rest of his life. And he started to drink early in high school and was an alcoholic for the rest of his life. There were a lot of factors that just combined there, and perhaps in somebody else they could handle it, and there's just something in a serial killer's character where those things combine and they become who they are, and nobody knows what that is. Of course, plenty of people have abuse in their childhood and don't grow up to be to repeat the cycle of abuse. Of course, someone else could have all those same characteristics that Jeffrey Dahmer had and grow up to be just fine. Nobody knows what actually triggers it. So I'm wary of committing to certain theories about how serial killers become what they are, because we're fumbling in the dark when it comes to that. We don't have a clue.
Right.
All we have are best guesses.
Well, 2 things, and I'm going to make one comparison because, again, I live by, memes and movie quotes and different entertainment references. But you were talking about, they said, or they were talking about, okay, there's supposedly a test that they can give kids at this point. It's almost like what was that, Minority Report. It's like, okay, well, you have a prequivally to probably being a violent person, or you have this and that, more of an aptitude to become this sort of person because you have this sort of brain, which, that almost goes back to I'm losing the term. It's not phenology. What's the thing where they could, like, feel bumps in the shape of your head and go, oh, well, this person's...
Oh, that's phrenology, yeah, and that's, of course, that's been discredited.
Right, just like, like eugenics and stuff. But it kind of harkened back to that, because there was just people... I think people want to be able to go, oh, yeah, this thing was wrong with him. He's different than us. And the problem is, we're all that. I mean, and I'm not saying that like, I think we need to feel that our neighbor down the street who cuts his lawn every week, the girl who's babysitting your kids, or the boy who's babysitting your kids, whatever, or the lady who's taking care of your kid at Sunday school or at temple or at dance class or something, in no way, shape, or form could be harboring a monster inside of them that they may not even know is there. But to say it's a monster and it's with all of us, what can we really sit and say that that's a deficit, or if that's a component that we have in the human animal that can be accessed if we feel it's necessary? I know I'm getting a little bit into David Banner, gamma ray stuff, like trying to draw this and that out. But, I think there's this very much us against them. We have to. That's why I think, like, even in war, good God, if you look back at World War II and like all the crazy racist Japanese Bugs Bunny cartoons and stuff, where they'd have the guys with the big buck teeth and the big round glasses and talking, like that. They're really extremely blatantly.
Yeah, they still had those when I was a kid, and I didn't really know what I was seeing at the time. If I see them now, I'm like, oh my God.
Didn't have a clue, right? And that's the thing. I didn't. Well, that's the thing. Even now, it's a little bit more innocuous. Like, if you're gonna have a little kind of Poindexter kid with the glasses and the slide rule, and of course he's sort of like not good at sports. He can't be like really bright and like this. Or of course, look at him. He's got like tape on his glasses. He's like the classic nerd. We just mask our stereotypes a little bit slicker, or maybe it's just certain things we've accepted. Like, yeah, that's okay. That's passable. Just like you're talking about, you can kill people all day in a movie, but, oh my God, they shot this horse. That better not have been real. Which I try to value all life, but I definitely value human life. I'm sort of in the thing of I don't necessarily want to just kill an animal for whatever. Being from the country, growing up poor, there were times we would have to go squirrel hunting, or luckily somebody would maybe give us, a little bit of deer meat and stuff, and we were thankful for that. We didn't like, screw you, deer. I'm eating you. I hate you. We're like very thankful for this, but we very well knew that a life was taken. And
sure, that's how the Native Americans used to operate with buffalo. They
right.
were very grateful to the buffalo for giving it so much because they used every part of the buffalo.
Well, and I think that's something that's happened. We've gotten to a point, we've gotten so far away, and here I am being deep again. We've stepped so far away from our roots and our true selves. I think that we've become, and I say spiritual with a very small s because I'm not religious, spiritually amnesic and forgotten what we are and who we are. That doesn't mean that we have to be purely animal, but we have to accept we have that side. And again, to make a kind of a musical quote, and you may not be a fan of Danzig, but he had a song where it says, I know my breeding, I know my father, he was born of light. I know we carry light and darkness in us, and that's the nature of the game. If you don't admit to that and roll with that and accept it and come to terms with it, you're kind of playing playtime, and that's just the nature of it. I've seen really, really good people do horrific things in bad situations, and I've seen horrible people do things that I wouldn't have expected. It's interesting when you hear like, Hitler was a vegetarian and he loved animals and this and that. But yeah, but he also was a mass murderer. So, that's why people.
That kind of goes. We have this modern sensibility now that in order to be a good person, you have to have been a good person your entire life and flawless, which I kind of blame social media for. But I'm reading a book now by Peter Vronsky called Sons of Cain. It's a history of serial killers from the beginning of human civilization to now. He makes a point, which isn't, it's not an original point really, but that our archetypes of monsters, and I'm loath to call serial killers or anyone like them monsters. They're just as human as you and I are, and humans are capable of really horrible things. It's just hard for a lot of people to admit that. Mm-hmm. He thinks that all of our stories throughout history about monsters more organized, calculated ones, like, say, vampires, versus more frenzied, disorganized ones like the Wolfman, say, are based in part on serial killers throughout history. I mean, they've always been with us. It's a phenomenon we sort of relate to the 60s through the 80s, but that's just because we've been studying them since then, really, in a criminal law sort of manner. So it's not a real new phenomenon. We just have the tools now to look at them from a criminal law viewpoint. And we've told each other stories and myths throughout human history. And perhaps then, when we believed in monsters that were in our communities in the Middle Ages, say, that's what we told ourselves those people were when we didn't know any better. We know better now, and we know people aren't monsters. They may behave monstrously, but people are people. They're not monsters. It's okay to admit that humans are capable of really awful, truly heinous things. I don't think it does us any good to tell ourselves, oh, only a monster would do that, not a real person.
I think it takes the responsibility of understanding yourself off your back, and first of all, you're kind of cheating yourself out of knowing yourself. Just like, well, you were talking about vampirism, like Vlad Tepes. If in Romania, he is a hero. He saved them from assaults.
Yeah.
Brutal, man. So freaking brutal. The most metal of guys. But it was a thing.
Literally, isn't he? Yeah, like every metalhead loves Vlad Tepes. I know a guy with a tattoo of him.
Right. But it's the thing, too, you have... Okay, it's like this. And I'm making sweeping blanket statements. So don't take it the wrong way. Like, you might have like the little librarian lady who's reading all these, love tales, and there's this kind of the ruggish brute who, just picks her up and, whatever, just kisses mum, and boom, they ride off, or she's protected by the white knight, because whatever. And then you have these guys that, like myself, that read like the Hulk and stuff as a kid because you felt small and scared and not in control, or whatever, and you couldn't let out your anger, and this gave you a out. And so once you see real life people who in their heads are free enough to do I come and go indiscriminately, and my demeanor and my actions are dictated on how you come to me, and I try to be, and when I say that, I'm not saying it like I'm a tough guy, but like I always say, look, if I had to go off on you, you might want to check and look at how your behavior was, or before you get upset, why I'm upset with you, because I'm really try to be a calm guy. Like you said, situations dictate actions. You can't just, like you said, go, oh well, we're in this modern age now. We're 3 minutes away from having tricorders and meeting Vulcans and stuff. It's so cool, right? But we again forget where we're from, and sometimes you have to have a Dahmer or even a Kaczynski or somebody like that, somebody that does stuff that's out of kind of beyond the pale in normal society, or what we consider polite society, to go, oh, this is real life. It doesn't matter what you're doing on Candy Crush or how many filters you want to put on your Snapchat. There are people that will blow you to pieces and eat you. And
yeah, with nary a second thought.
Not a problem.
They'll do it as easily as you and I flip the switch when we're leaving a room. I think Ted Bundy is actually a good example of that. Ted Bundy was charming. He was handsome. He was successful. He was in law school. He volunteered at a suicide hotline. He was active in Republican politics. He was this great guy that your mom would love you to bring home. And he killed, dozens of women. He was a necrophile. He was an awful human being. And that's what made him much more dangerous, was how well he blended into society and how much of a mask he wore to mimic us, because he was very much a sociopath who just didn't have feelings, just couldn't empathize with people. But those kind of people learn to fake it by watching us. And yeah, he was a scary, scary dude for that reason. You know, you can look at some people and go, ooh, something's wrong. Something's not right there. But he wasn't one of them. You would just look at this guy and, shoot the bull with him, smile, shake his hand, and think he was just as normal as you.
Right. I mean, if you look at, I'm just saying, if you look at things like Dexter and things like that, because everyone goes, well, serial killers, well, they're, man, they're obviously different. They're like, do you ever see the movie M?
Oh, Fritz Lang?
Yes.
A long time ago, yeah.
Okay, which I
The
love.
Cure wrote a song about it.
So many good Fritz Lang movies, but that thing is where it kind of was touching on that, talking about the child killer, and people can't wrap their heads around that because no one wants to see the true face that humanity is brutal. That doesn't mean that we aren't capable of such beauty, but it ebbs and wanes. It comes in phases. There's moments, I don't want to say necessarily everybody, I'm sure, but there's moments where, I don't know, let's say whatever. Let's say somebody broke into your house and brutalized your mom, or somebody ran over, hit your kid with a car, didn't even look back. In that moment, you're like, I could frickin' kill that guy, and mean it. And it's not, you're not insane. You're done. The gloves are off. Civility is out. You are in pure, vengeance mode, and that's an extremely human thing. Even our gods were more like that in the past. It wasn't until when they started kind of rearranging books of the Bible and stuff and taking out certain elements. And I'm going to get calls about that, but
Are you really?
I don't know. I might, but it's okay. The thing is, just you have to understand where all this come from and where all these different beliefs come from, and because there's that whole point of going, oh well, we have to be like this. Well, why do you think we have to be like that? There's a story my brother used to say to me. He said, I didn't know which way you were going to go. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you were obviously a very intelligent kid, but you didn't fall in with the rules on it. And it's not because you were like a bad boy walking around, your little leather jacket. You were just like, I can do the exact same thing but this way. Well, no, well, there's this way. Well, why? I can get the same end result, either quicker, just as easy, and it's nothing's hurt, I get done the same thing. And it's the rationale of going, I'm just going to do it this way. There's that you don't necessarily feel you have to adhere to the rules, because the rules are a social construct. To me, morality and good and evil is a social construct. Again, I'm not religious, and so I've actually interviewed people that was connected with the Satanic Church and stuff like that, and it actually says you're actually closer to us than a lot of people in your beliefs.
Yeah, I think they're more, the Satanic Church I think is more libertarian / on-rand objectivism than anything. They're no one to be afraid of.
Right. Which we could get into a whole other show on Rand, but it's one of those things. But it's just one of those things where there's truth. Blood is telling. Pardon the pun, and it just is what it is. It's as final as a corpse. It's no bringing that back. It is what it is. Well, let me ask you this. We were talking a little bit about the I'm blanking on the show now. The tourism show.
Yeah, Dark Tourist.
Dark Tourist, thank you. Did you think, like, when all this went down, how did they approach you with that? Did they, how did they even know about you? How did
they find me?
Yeah.
Well, I have a friend, my friend Tracy Moody. She's
which is a great
kind of
name.
It is a good name, isn't it? Wish my name was Moody. She's kind of a public atheist. She still writes, I think, for Friendly Atheist. She lives, and I don't want to like out her where she lives. I already gave her full name. But she was writing around the time, and this is up in your neck of the woods, when that giant Noah's Ark was being built at taxpayer expense. It was a huge boondoggle. Yeah, you remember that? I know you do.
I sure do.
So she was sort of writing all kinds of articles about that guy. Who was it? It wasn't Ray Comfort, was it? The guy that built it?
Man, I don't know. It's one of these deals where I walk, how do I put it? I'm the 8 ball, or I'm like the little neutral ball walking amongst like a lot of really charged politically people. You know, my thing was like this. I was like, look, if you want to build this thing, man, do your thing. I don't think it needs to be with state money. Or if you're going to start doing that with state money, I've been saying churches should have been paying taxes since the beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't claim separation of church and state without actually having a separation between church and state.
Well, everyone fell for it. This guy got to use taxpayer money. Then he decided, he told everyone, oh, sure, I'm going to hire all kinds of townspeople, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Ken Ham, and that's who it was, Ken Ham. After he said he was going to hire all these townspeople, then he decided, oh, I'm only going to hire the ones who are fundamentalist Christians. So it was just a scam and a half. So meanwhile, while this is all going on, my friend Tracy is writing about it, exposing him for the fraud that he is. She even met him a few times until he decided to start hiding from her because he was terrified of her. It was great. So Dark Tourist, the show, actually approached her first because they wanted her to be on for their episode about the Ark. And when she found out they were going to do a Dahmer show, she recommended me. And one day I was browsing the serial killer subreddit of Reddit, as you do, and they had posted about the show and how they were looking for somebody to be on it for their Dahmer episode. Everyone on the Reddit was like, oh, yeah, right, you're just looking for victims, blah, blah, blah. But I knew who they were since I'd spoken to my friend. So I messaged them privately and told them who I was, what I did, my credentials. I had already edited Patrick Kennedy's book at that time. And they put me in touch with one of the producers. I spoke with her on the phone a few times. And then out of the blue, they said, okay, we got you a ticket to Milwaukee. Be here this day and time. And so I said, okay, not really thinking, Netflix, many hundreds of millions of people will be watching this. So I just did it without thinking about it. And I had a lot of fun. It was a great time. There's a lot that they cut that I'm hoping shows up on like a website or something later on.
Extended edition or something like that.
The extended version.
I would think that, because like you said, we talked before, I write and do stuff like that. And I've even wanted to have some of this stuff put into, some sort of like a hauntings of thing or stuff like that. But due to the fact, like you said, they take stuff so out of context, and they can take, like, again, movie reference. Here's Fred. Poor Fred says, you're going to turn around and make it, like I'm saying, Coolville sucks, and that's all they had. Coolville sucks. Fred said it. And I don't need that. I make myself look like enough of an idiot without them editing my words. And
I did worry about that. Most of reality TV as we know it kind of began around like 99, 2000 with, Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire and that kind of stuff, which I thought was,
Real World.
I was like, even Real World, which began about 92. But around 99, 2000, every single reality show, I'm like, okay, that's it. It cannot go any lower than this. And of course, they always find a way to lower the bar. But you get to realize, especially if you know anything about how TV is filmed, you can see the edits, you can see the trick shots. So I was thinking, oh man, what am I going to do if they edit me to look like I'm psychotic? Because clearly in a show like that with a subject like that, they're gonna want someone a little less. I mean, you saw the show. I'm not scary looking at all. And in fact, that's the first thing David Farrier said to me was, "I don't know what we were expecting, but you don't really look like it."
Well,
because
the first one,
I'm harmless.
No, I mean, the thing is that I learned a long time ago, and this is not anything to do with you. It's the loudmouth you don't have to worry about so much. The ones that's real over the top, not so much. It's the quiet ones. The quiet ones, still waters run deep. I mean, it's a cliche, but there's some truth to that. And when their convictions are strong, and if they do blow up, they blow up big. And yeah, there's something about that. I think people have this mentality of, because like I said, I'm this bald guy and stuff, and kind of Uncle Festerish looking, and I think that people think because again, you write nothing about more like paranormal and cryptids and blah blah, and folklore too, history, and trying to work on books about special needs children and stuff like that, but they have this thing that you're just walking in with a cape, and which, don't get me wrong, I mean, I probably would, because I'm a big Hammer Films nut, but there's a big difference in that. I think people want to marginalize a person and sort of put them out on the fringes of society and go, okay, well, that's that. Which I think there's a causal thing. I think if you are already on the outskirts and are somewhat marginalized, you go, you know what? What's it matter? I'm going to be, and there's a certain freedom. There's a certain freedom in being ostracized and having your having some of the social weight of going, oh, I have to be. There was a card. Okay, again, I mean, I'm talking media so much. There was a show called The Oblongs, and it had these characters called the Debbies in it, and it was all these like kind of sorority chicks running around. Oh my God, your hair's so cute, and this is, and just ultra like stereotypically white chicks, and frat girls and stuff, and it was like the ones that were on the outside. It's like they were like you could see tumbleweeds blowing past them. It's just like they were completely pushed out. Man, they might as well be lepers because they weren't part of that group, and there's something to be said for that. And I think when you have people, again, back to things like Dahmer and people who, if not necessarily ostracized for wealth or this and that, due to their orientation, they feel that they're even ostracized in themselves to a point because they can't be who they really are due to the fact that, even here in like the 70s and the 80s, you're going to get yelled at, stuff thrown at you. I mean, I had like mohawks and stuff, and people were calling me, gay, and other, more explicit versions of that, throwing beer bottles at you. But that's part of it. That's part of it, and people sometimes can take that and turn it into a positive, but sometimes people do go down or feel in a position they have to go down a certain path. But let me ask you this, in a little bit of time that we got left, because I don't want to keep you on here too long, because I've really kept you on here for a long time.
That's fine.
Is there any either events, web pages, anything like that you have going on, or that you're interested in, or feel passionate about that you want to mention in the few minutes that we got left?
Not me personally. I tend to be fairly private, and I flipped out a little when I started getting weird. I started getting random Facebook requests and Twitter followers. I had to dump all my dating apps because I kept getting messages saying, "Didn't I see you on?" And I'm like, "No, you never saw me before."
Oh man.
So, but I did tell. I got a great painting, which I'll have to send you a picture of because I did think this was going to be on video. Nico Clos. It's hard to say his name. He's French. Nico Clos, the Vampire of Paris, now a wonderful artist, very well known in the true crime serial killer community. He painted me a gorgeous Dahmer portrait, and I asked if I had his permission to say so on your show or show it, and if I could in return, plug his Instagram page. He said yes. So if anyone is interested in really well done serial killer or crime art, please check out Nico's page. It's Nico Claux, NICO_CLAUX. That's his Instagram account. He's a great, very kind guy, very good artist, and I like him a lot. Nothing of mine to plug except the book that I edited that I still don't know when it's coming out. It's in page design now, but it's called Dahmer Detective by Patrick Kennedy, and it shouldn't be too much longer. I mean, it's done. It just needs to be page designed and printed, but I'm looking forward to that. I basically revised most of it. This would be the second edition. The first edition's still available, but I don't recommend it. Revised it, fact-checked it, put a lot more research into it, so it's a much better product. I'm very proud of it. I feel like it's half my book, so definitely keep an eye out for Dahmer Detective by Detective Patrick Kennedy. He's now deceased, so I didn't have him to rely on when I was polishing it, so it took a lot of work.
Right. Well, I'll say this. Once off air, if you don't mind, or later if you can send me the links to the two different writers you'd mentioned earlier as well, because between now and tomorrow when I can probably check it, it will be so far out of my head, and I definitely want to try to get in touch with those gentlemen. And
sure. Which ones were those? I'm going to have to write that down myself.
Talking about the bodies one, and then talking about the history of the serial killer.
Oh, okay. Vronsky and Terezi. Okay, absolutely.
Okay. Cool. What I'm going to do is I'm not sure if you can hear my little outro music. I want to tell everybody thank you for tuning in, and like I said, this is a little bit longer episode. I'm going to try to bring them in a little bit longer, and because I really want to get more in depth on this and give people time to really get to learn and know the people that we're interviewing and get to learn. And Natalie Ballard, I appreciate you being on, and I hope to hear more. Thank you for having me. I want to hear more back from you, especially when this book is out, and I definitely want to see those pictures. But I want to tell everybody thank you, and as the night draws near to us and shadows grow long, I want you to settle in and love each other, love yourselves, but make sure to look in the closet, look under your beds. You never know what's lurking, but it's okay to be a little scared. That's part of the human experience, and we learn from it. So until next time, everybody, stay scared, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much.